G'day guys, welcome to the Process of Success podcast. I'm here today with former Australian cricketer Adam Voges. Vogesy, thanks very much for your time. Thanks for joining us.
No worries, mate.
Let's get started by taking you back to your childhood. What's the earliest memory you have of cricket and playing cricket?
Growing up, Dad was a school teacher, so we moved around a little bit in my early childhood. Spent a couple of years out in Kalgoorlie. And it wasn't really until I was about 9 or 10 where we came back and settled down in Warnbro, in the Rockingham area, that I finally actually started playing cricket. So it wasn't probably until 10 or 11, I think, until I actually got involved in the game.
And was that just sort of in the backyard with your dad and brother, or did you go to sort of Milo, have a go back then, or straight into a team, or how did that look?
Yeah, so had a little brother and a little sister who spent many hours in the backyard along with mum and dad playing games of cricket. And it wasn't until we moved to Warnbro that I actually got the opportunity to go down and to the local cricket club, which just happened to be down the road, which was handy. And in a modified rules game was my first outing, and then moved into the under 11s and under 13s pretty quickly after that.
Awesome. And then what age did you start to get some sort of coaching, I suppose? You obviously had a coach at the team, but did you start to get private coaching or one-on-one coaching at some point in your teenage years?
Yeah, I did. Dad was a huge help for me, particularly early on. I had some really good coaches when I was that young age, and still remember a lot of them. Dad was probably the main guy that I used, particularly up until I got to about 16 or 17 years of age, and then started working with other coaches one-on-one. I'd go up to, Dad would drive me up to the Wacker a couple of times of the week to be involved in a couple of the junior squads up there, and it just sort of progressed from there.
And so was your dad a cricketer himself?
No, he wasn't, but his way of getting involved in my cricket was to be around either as a coach or an umpire. He used to umpire when I moved, my first district cricket was at Fremantle for the under 15s, and Dad came up and he was either the coach one year or he was the umpire the next year, and I was bowling my little left arm leggies, and Dad was umpiring, so I probably got a few favourable LBs along the way, but he was always involved along the way.
Awesome. And then, back to your teenage years, was that sort of like, were you training every single day, or was just something you did a few times a week for a bit of fun? How did that look in your teenage years?
Yeah, no, not from that point. Cricket was something that I loved doing, but it probably wasn't the enormous focus for me in terms of, I didn't think it was going to be a career path for me. I thought about one day hoping to play first class cricket or playing for Australia, but at that point, I was just a teenage kid who liked hanging out with his mates, played some cricket, and we all played cricket together, and that was probably what kept us together, was being able to play with your mates through that period. And it wasn't until probably I got to that sort of under 17 level, and I actually got picked for the West Australian under 17s team on the back of some great performances and some training, that I actually started to take it a bit more seriously.
Yeah, nice one. And you've mentioned your dad was a big influence. Did you have any other mentors growing up, or did you idolise any cricketers? And also, who were your mentors throughout your career?
Yeah, so I've had a number of mentors. Yeah, Dad was a huge influence on me, particularly in the early years. I used to go down. He'd take me to the Wacker. Like I said, we lived in Safety Bay, and the trek from Warnbro, getting from Warnbro to the Wacker was a little bit more difficult back then than what it is now with the freeway. For a good hour and a half, twice a week, each way, Dad would take me up for junior squad training, and so that was a huge commitment on his behalf, and that played a huge part in my development. But along the way we'd go up to games, watch games. I love watching Tom Moody bat, or Mike Hussey, Damien Martin, Jeff Marsh, even when I was a bit younger. Just love watching these iconic WA players when I got the opportunity to go and watch a bit of Sheffield Shield cricket. Then as I moved through my career, I had a couple of different mentors. Paul Terry became quite important to me when I moved from Rockingham up to play grade cricket at Melville when I was 18, 19. He played a big part in my development during that period. And then Wayne Andrews, who's probably been my batting coach, well, was my batting coach for the majority of my first class career, was always someone who knew my game incredibly well. He was someone who I could bounce ideas off, who was outside of the WACA system at that time, but was someone who, if I went over to England and played, or if I was away for any period of time, he was someone I could talk to about my game, and when I got back, he'd be able to tell whether, or if something was different in my game after I'd hit 3 or 4 balls, he'd know straight away. And I think that was so crucial for me to have that person outside of the system who knew my game incredibly well, who I could work with as well.
Awesome. On that note, we'll give a shout out to all the parents who are listening. Voguesy's mentioned his dad used to drive him up. My mum used to get up early and take me to training. So shout out to all your parents for doing great things for your kids. Now, you mentioned your left arm Chinaman. You were a junior, you were quite a talented left arm Chinaman from all reports. You then, I think the story is you went to the academy and you might have come back as a batter and you made a career out of being a batter who bowls left arm orthodox. Can you take us back to that and tell us how that all evolved?
Yeah, so, well, technically I started as a left arm tearaway at under 13s, but then got to under 15 level and hurt my back and couldn't bowl my left arm very medium pace at the time. But so decided to take up and try a few left arm leg spin or Chinaman. And the first game I bowled them in, I took 6 wickets. So I thought, I'll persist with this for a little while. I still remember the game. We're at Stevens Reserve. Marcus North was playing in the opposition against Wanneroo. And yeah, so it sort of developed from there. So all through my junior career, under 17s, under 19s, I went to England with the Australian under 19s team, primarily as a left arm wrist spinner who batted 8 or 9 in the lineup during that tour in 1999, and then was lucky enough to go to the Cricket Academy under Rod Marsh in Adelaide in 2000, and it was there that not necessarily my bowling took a back seat, but my batting developed a lot during that period. I worked really hard on my batting during that time, and then after that period, the left arm leggy sort of faded away a little bit. It's an incredibly difficult art, as I was finding out more and more, and it got to the point where I just wasn't enjoying it anymore. So gave them up for a little while. Fortunately, my batting had really progressed by that stage, and so my worth as a player in the team was probably more so with the bat than what it was with the ball, to the point where one day at South Perth, I bowled a couple of long hops, couple of full tosses, and that was it. Never bowled them again after that. So my transition from left arm wrist spin to batter went from under 19s left arm wrist spinner to then making my first class debut as a batter at age 22, 23.
And was that through just volume, or did you sort of change your belief about, hang on a minute, I'm actually quite a good batter here, or what was the difference from you being an 8 or 9 to then saying, okay, I can actually be a top order player?
Yeah, it probably started under 17s level. I got an opportunity during the carnival as a night watchman. So I came in at 3 against Northern Territory, I think it was, faced a couple of overs that night and then batted the next day and got 100. So that was probably the moment that I thought, well, maybe I can play as a batter, or maybe this is something that I can pursue a little bit more. And after that, it was really volume, because I was probably a fair way behind in terms of the other batters and the level that they were at that stage. But I had a fair belief in my own game, but it was very much a matter of getting a lot of volume in over that time.
Nice one. Now, any young cricketers listening or watching, it's a great lesson that you just don't know where you're going to end up, and make sure you're trying to work on all facets of your game. It's really important to try and develop maybe your second or third skill, because you might end up like Vogues, you might be a spinner now and end up averaging 60 in Test cricket. So moving forward, you then sort of made your debut in first class cricket, and then you dominated Australian domestic cricket for a number of years. You did very well, and then it wasn't until you were about 27, 28 where you got your first taste of international cricket in ODI in 2020. Did you always think that selection at the next level would come? And at times when things maybe were tough, what was driving you? Was it that carrot of playing international cricket that was driving you to continue to get better?
Yeah, so made my first class debut in 2002, and that was on the back of winning the Ollie Cooley medal, the local grade medal here in Perth. I scored 500s in the season, which again just sort of, I guess, gave me that self-belief that I was ready and able to take that next step, but didn't get an opportunity during that season, but got an opportunity the next season at the back end. Made my first class debut with Bo Casson and Luke Ronke. All three of us debuted in the same game, and those guys went on to pretty good careers as well. So played 4 games and then didn't get another game for 12 months. So I think during that time I was not... I hadn't sort of given up, but I was a little unsure about where I stood in terms of WA cricket. I'd had a little bit of a taste and I certainly wanted more, but throughout that 12-month period, there was no opportunities. WA were playing some good cricket, and to be fair, I wasn't bashing down the door in grade cricket. My 500s the season before or 2 years before turned into 5 scores of 60 or 70 or 80, which doesn't look nearly as good as what 500s do. So I wasn't probably putting my name in lights enough during that period, and it wasn't until the following season where I started the year really well and then got that opportunity. So that was where my career sort of really began to blossom, and then it was a period of the next couple of years where I wouldn't say I dominated domestic cricket. I played really well in white ball cricket, in particular 50 over cricket, which is where I did get my first opportunity. First class cricket, I was going okay, but I wouldn't say I was ever really dominating it.
And just on that, I think a lot of players contact us and say they struggle to change between 2020 and 2-day cricket in junior cricket. How, as a very elite cricketer, how did you manage the sort of your game from white ball cricket to red ball cricket? You might play a white ball game, especially in England, you might play a white ball game and a few days later you've got a red ball game. How did you manage your practice and your preparation? Yeah,
I think as I learnt over time that you have to be really comfortable and know how you want to approach each form of the game. Back then, I was really confident and really happy with how I was approaching my 50 over white ball cricket. I was less sure around first class cricket, and probably my statistics showed that. My white ball numbers were a lot better than my red ball, and I look back now and I think it was purely because I had a very good understanding of my white ball game and how I could rotate strike, how I could find boundary options. But my red ball game probably wasn't quite as refined at that stage, and so I was probably still trying to work that out. Then we introduced 2020 cricket a little bit later on, and now all players around the world have to be able to jump between different formats, and I think players are getting better at it purely because they have to. More cricket gets played now, so the more you have to jump between formats is just inevitable. So I guess my advice on that would be just to have a really clear understanding about how you want to play your game in each form of the game, and that at least gives you an opportunity or gives you a chance to give yourself the best chance, I guess.
Excellent. And now, you played your last white ball game for Australia in September 2013, and despite having an ODI batting average of almost 46 and a strike rate of 87, it was almost 2 years until you got selected for the Test team. You were 34, 35 around that time, and a lot of people might have thought your international career was over. You obviously had other ideas and you went on to have a record-breaking season, but what was driving you at that stage?
I was probably one of those people who thought my international career was over. Yeah, look, I was 33 years of age. We'd just come back from India, and we'd lost the series. It was a really high-scoring series, and I'd done okay. I was okay. I'd averaged mid-40s throughout my career and during that series, and thought I'd done okay. But Darren Lehman came in as coach and sort of tapped me on the shoulder and said, look, we can't have Michael Clarke, George Bailey and Adam Voges in the same team. You all play a very similar role, and there's not room for 3 of you. Michael Clarke was the captain, George Bailey was the vice captain, so it wasn't too difficult to work out who was going to miss out. So that was really disappointing. That was hard to hear. I thought I'd been going okay, but yeah, look, that took me a little while to I guess get over that disappointment. But then I got my focus back to the real reason that I started playing cricket was to hang out with my mates and play some good cricket and hopefully win some stuff as a team. And I don't think I ever lost that, but most of the more enjoyable moments of my career are around having team success. And I think that really became a big focus for me. I'd taken over the leadership with Western Australia. We hadn't won anything in a very long time, and so I put a lot of my energy into trying to build that group of players to be able to compete at the highest level and compete in Sheffield Shield finals, one-day finals and Big Bash finals in Australian domestic cricket. And so putting all my energy into that meant that I was free to just go out and play the game my way. And I just had a freak 12 months where everything clicked. I had some really good processes in place with how I prepare for each game. And so I went through a period where I got starts in every game, and then I was just really hungry. Once I got in, no one was going to get me out. And I went through that whole 12, 18 month period where I felt very confident every time I walked to the crease. And I knew that if I got past my first 20 or 30 balls, then they weren't getting me out. And that was a nice place to be.
Absolutely, and that's where you went on to score 1,215 runs in 10 matches and set all sorts of records and won all sorts of awards. So was it the fact that you maybe took your attention off yourself and off sort of playing at a higher level and focused on the group? Was that one of the things that you've touched on there that you think was a big change? Or was there any technical or other mental changes that you made in that period?
I think there was a lot of little things that probably contributed to it. The kids were a little bit older now, so I was probably getting a bit more sleep, which helped. But my life balance with my family and my cricket was really good. So I was in a good space with that sort of thing. My routines that I spoke about, I was very specific in how I would go about preparing for each game. I would sit down and write about the opposition players that I was going to face the next day or the next game. And have a really clear understanding about how I thought they were going to try and get me out, and then how I was going to counter that. So every time I walked to the crease, I had a pretty good idea of what was coming at me and how I wanted to play against particular deliveries. And so having that clarity when I was out there made my decision making probably a little bit better than what it had been. And then that was just the ability to keep doing it for a long period.
Awesome. And you sort of touched on, was there any other part of your preparation that you changed? Anything else? Were you hitting more balls or hitting less balls? Or you mentioned getting more sleep. That's a hugely important factor in anyone's career. Is there anything else in your sort of your routine or your preparation that was it different at that point?
Nothing that was overly different. We'd made a couple of little technical changes once Justin Langer came on board. So I think they were all working really well by that stage. We'd sort of nailed that down. Whether I hit more or less balls, I tried to hit more of them out in the middle than what I did at training by that stage, and it worked really well. So I got really specific with my training. It was very much a quality over quantity, because I was batting for long periods of time, which was great. So I was really specific about how I wanted to go about it, and once I knew that my game was ready, I'd walk out of the net. I was ready to go, so I didn't need to hit balls just for the sake of hitting balls. And during that time, I know it's easy to try and hit balls when things aren't going well, but I found a really good balance. I found a really good balance in my training, so that every time I walked out or every time I walked into the middle for a game, I was ready to go. And I've taken little bits and pieces from a lot of good players that I've played with over the years. Another big thing that I would do was really engage in the partnership with my mate at the other end. And particularly during that year, Michael Klinger had come over from South Australia, and we had a number of 100, 200 and even 300 run partnerships during that time. He had a fantastic season as well. But it was just the ability to keep each other going, and a little method that I learnt from Simon Kadich was just to take the partnership up in 10s each time and just tick off a 10. Once you'd got to 10, let's get to 20, mate. And then once we get to 20, and we just keep it as simple as getting up to 10s each time. And it's amazing how quickly the scoreboard ticks along if you just have those little goals that you can tick off along the way. And that made a huge part. That played a huge part in it as well.
Awesome. Now you've just touched on Michael Clarke and Kadich. You played with and against the world's best players over the last 15, 20 years. What are some other things, what are some other traits, or what are some common themes that you've seen in the world's best players that you've spent some time with?
I mean, everyone's a little bit different, but I've never seen anyone get there without working incredibly hard at their game. I look at the way Steve Smith plays now, and having seen how he trains, it doesn't surprise me at all that he's the #1 ranked batsman in the world at the moment. He hits as many balls as I've ever seen a batsman hit at training. And look, that's not for everyone. That's not everyone's cup of tea, but for him, he obviously needs that, and that's what works for him. And he's been incredibly successful with that. But I think a work ethic and a confidence in your own ability are two of the things that every great player has. Regardless of technique or the way that they score their runs, the fact that they have a genuine confidence in the way that they can go about it, and they work incredibly hard. I think they're the two traits that probably stands everyone apart.
Yeah, nice one. Now, going back sort of through your career, you then made your test debut, and you scored 100 on debut against the West Indies, and our mutual friend Big Stewie was there. Shout out to Big Stewie if he's listening. So you then sort of started well, progressed through to the Ashes, and had a pretty tough start in the Ashes that year, 2015 Ashes in England. You finished the Ashes with two really hard-fought half-centuries. What was going through your mind, or how did you feel, and what did you do to bounce back from that sort of low point, I suppose, when things were tough and not going your way and people were saying, oh, he's too old, he should be dropped in England?
Yeah. I guess I always knew that when you're debuting, when you're playing your first test at the age of 35, that it was never going to be for a long time. So I wanted to make it a good time for as long as it lasted. And yes, the West Indies was brilliant. It was great to get some opportunity there. I guess getting picked for that tour and then the Ashes tour, I wasn't sure if I was even going to play. And had Chris Rogers not been hit in the head 2 days before the first test in Dominica, I probably wouldn't have played. So yeah, we got to England, and the buzz and the hype that surrounds an Ashes series is like anything else, is not like anything else, sorry. And I remember as a young boy staying up late with my little brother, watching Ashes series, and just thinking how awesome would that be to be able to play in an Ashes series. So to be able to actually be part of that was incredible. And yes, the results didn't go our way, and I had a poor series, to be honest. I got to 30 in my first innings at Cardiff and chipped Ben Stokes straight to cover. And I was so dirty on myself because that went against everything that I'd been doing so well a lot of the time.
Was that a technical mistake or
No, that was purely a mental mistake. It was late in the day on day 3, I think, 2 or 3. And it was just a poor mistake. He'd bowled well to me for a period of time. And rather than just waiting it out like I had been doing for the last 12 months, I decided to play at a ball that I didn't need to. And, excuse me, bounced a little bit more, got caught at short cover. And it was a really soft dismissal, and that was really disappointing. Mark Wood bowled me a pretty good ball, second or third ball in the second innings, which I nicked. I've always been a big believer that if you nick one in your first 5-10 balls, then so be it. Like, everyone nicks them early. I was more disappointed with the fact that I got out when I'd actually got a start and got to 30. So yeah, look, I missed out in the first test at Cardiff, which was a really good batting wicket, and then that put a lot of pressure on me, not starting the series well. We went to Lords, we won comfortably. I think I got 25 in the second test at Lords, batted once, and then England changed their pitches and changed their whole tactics about how they wanted to approach the rest of the series. We played on green seamers basically, which was tough work. The Duke's balls were swinging around, they were overcast a lot of the time, there was plenty of green grass on the wickets, so batting all of a sudden became twice as hard. Well, it felt like to me that it became twice as hard. So to then miss out at Edgbaston, to lose that test, and then to be part of getting bowled out for 60 at Trent Bridge, were probably two of the lower parts of my career, well, certainly my international career, but probably my entire career, to be walking off after getting out in that first innings at Trent Bridge. I genuinely thought that might be my last test. And so going into the second innings of that match, we were miles behind the game. We weren't going to save the game. We had little any chance of winning it. So I went out to bat in that second innings, and I just said to myself, right, they're not getting me out. And I look back, and I don't think that was a great mentality to have at the time, because I fought really hard, but my feet didn't move. I didn't play any shots. I just stayed and survived and had a little bit of luck along the way, which I needed. But they didn't get me out. And so I managed to hang in for long enough. We lost that test match. Fortunately, that 50 that I got in the second innings and the fact that we'd lost the series meant that I probably got another opportunity, batted a lot better at the Oval in the 5th test, and then just felt like I was starting to bat like I knew I could bat at the back end of that series, which once it was all over was really disappointing. I would have loved to have done that at the start, but that's how it worked out.
So was there a point where you sort of sat down and thought, okay, I've got to sort of change something here, or you just went in with that mentality and it was just you fought hard, had a little bit of luck, which you probably didn't have early in the series.
Yeah.
I know that Stokes took that one-hander and things didn't go your way. But was there anything that you did specifically that sort of changed the way you sort of went about it?
I refined my game. I basically took out any driving in my game. So if they bowled me a half volley, I pretty much just blocked it back to them. I just waited for them to get straight to me, or I waited for a cut shot or a pull shot, because they were my strengths, and that's what my game's been based around a lot of the time. I worked out fairly early in my career that they were probably the areas that I was going to score the majority of my runs, and so I made sure that I was really good when the ball got straight or if I got a cut shot. So I literally just waited until they got to those areas. And again, I look back at the innings and I've watched the replay, and it wasn't pretty. Like, I didn't actually play very well, but the majority of my runs came through clipping through mid-wicket or a cut shot, and that's so from that point I was able to get through that, and then I expanded a little bit more in the fifth test.
That's amazing. That's sort of a story I've heard many times before, is when Tendulkar scored a double hundred at the SCG, he did the same thing. He said he was nicking off and then he took the cover drive away, and he was the same, just left half volleys outside off and made them bowl straight, made them bowl to his cut, and it shows incredible mental toughness and discipline. So then you came back to Australia and went on an amazing run, which included 400s in 6 innings, a couple of double hundreds. You started being compared to Bradman. Your test average was incredible. What was sort of your mindset in that stage? That must have felt amazing, especially after the lows of England. And then what was sort of coming off the back of one double hundred? You could easily relax and get comfortable, but what was driving you to keep churning out the runs?
Yeah, I was really lucky throughout most of that series, because I was coming in the first test at the Gabba. I came in at 3 for 300, and I mean, David Warner, Joe Burns had got big runs. I think Usman had got runs as well. So I was coming in facing a fairly tired attack. I wasn't even sure if I was going to play the first test of that summer, because we'd obviously lost the Ashes. Again, I was 36 by then. If the selectors wanted to make a change, well, then I'd probably given them a reason to, with the way I'd played in England. So going into that first test in Brisbane, I got a few runs in the first Shield game down in Tassie, and then was lucky enough to get picked into that game, and went into that first test. Again, felt like I was fighting for my spot still. So to go in, I guess, at 3 for 300 was very much a luxury, and was able to then craft an innings against some pretty tired bowlers, which certainly helped my confidence and the way that I could start the series and start the summer. I think back at starting poorly in England, I was really determined to start well during the Australian summer, because I then thought it would really set my whole summer up. So to play well in Brisbane, to get some confidence out of that, to win that test match, and then to come to Perth and score 100 against New Zealand at the Wacker at my home ground in front of my friends and family is probably it'll be my favourite innings. It is my favourite innings of my career. It wasn't my best one. It was on a flat wicket. But to get 100 in that test match, I took an enormous amount out of that. And then was able to then just continue that on throughout the season. Again, making sure that when I got in, I made sure that I kept going and scoring as many runs as I could.
Awesome. Now, do you have something that we're really interested in with high performers and successful people is their habits and routines? Do you have any sort of daily or weekly habits, and what did your routines look like leading into a test match or leading into a Shield game?
Yeah, again, routine-wise was very much my mental routines were very consistent. How I prepared physically in terms of training and that sort of thing, they could vary from game to game. Like, I didn't have to necessarily hit or train for a certain amount of time before each game. Like I mentioned, when I was ready to go, I was ready to go, and that was it. And then it was just more about the mental routine and making sure that was consistent throughout. And there was times where I thought, oh, do I really need to do this? Like, I'm playing pretty well at the moment. I'm batting well. Do I need to keep doing this? But that was the one big discipline that I made sure that I continued to do, regardless of whether I was playing Test cricket first class cricket for WA. I even started doing it when I was playing grade cricket as well, because it just got me into a really good mind frame to be able to then go out and bat as well as I possibly could. So it was just, and again, I look over the notes of what I've written, and there's nothing genius in there. It's just more a reminder of what I'd been doing well, and again, how people were going to try and get me out and how I was going to counter that. So a lot of it revolved around leaving well early, playing straight early. If they gave me a cut shot, to just smack it basically, to make sure that I was ready for that. I always knew that if I was sharp, if I could cut the ball earlier, meaning so I knew I was sharp and I was picking length up well then. So yeah, in terms of routines, it was very much just keeping the mental side of my game as consistent as possible.
It's interesting you said. I had a chat with Steve Smith a little while ago, and he was over here for a one-day series, and he spoke about how he knows how Pakistan were going to get him out. And it was a couple of days before an ODI at the Wacker, and he said they're going to bowl wide to him, and he's going to do this and do that. And it was incredible to see him then execute it and score 100, and just by having that mental preparation. So something the best players do by the sounds of it. Something we get asked quite a lot, and I see in the sessions I coach, is players, when they make a mistake, they get really frustrated and really annoyed. I suppose back in your early part of your career, you're a lot older and wiser now, but how did you deal with a mistake? Say you'd play and miss, or maybe you'd get dropped, or you didn't quite hit them as well as you'd like to. How did you deal with a mistake and move forward?
Yeah, I certainly deal with it a lot better now than what I used to, and I think that was just through making a lot of mistakes and getting incredibly frustrated, and then realising that it didn't matter how frustrated or angry I got about it, that wasn't going to fix it. So I worked out quite quickly that I needed to have a balance about how I would deal with disappointment and the game itself, because it's a brilliant game, but there are so many highs and lows within the game, within the team performance and in your own individual performance, that you need to be able to find a balance. And everyone's balance is going to be a little bit different, but a balance that allows you to not get too far ahead of yourself when things are going well, and to never get too disappointed when things don't go your way. Because if you continue to do the things, and probably the thing that it took me the longest to learn was to keep trusting that what I was doing was right, even though the results weren't how I liked or how I wanted them to be. I had to continue to trust that the way I was approaching the game and the way that I wanted to play the game was right for me. Yes, you'd always tinker a little bit. I was forever tinkering around with a little bits and pieces with my technique. But just having that trust in myself that for the next opportunity that I got, and that was the biggest thing, one of the other things that I really learnt was that the most important thing for me as a batter, the most crucial thing for me was the next ball that I faced. What has happened has happened. I couldn't change that. That was gone now. They talk about mental toughness and resilience. For me, the definition of resilience for a cricketer is focusing on what's important, and that's the next ball that you get to face or the next ball that you bowl.
Absolutely. Now, you spoke a little bit about balance there. How, in your younger years, obviously now being a father, you've got two young children, Xavier and Ella, how did you switch off away from the game when you were a bit younger? I'm sure that they take up a lot of your time now, but how did you sort of get away and relax and take your mind off the game, I suppose?
Yeah, I mean, I studied early, I was working. For the first few years that I was a first-class cricketer, I was still working part-time, if not full-time. It was a little bit different back then in terms of our training schedules and that sort of thing, so you had a lot more time on your hands to continue to work or study. So, yeah, it was... For me, it was always finding something away from the game that could take my mind off it so that I wasn't thinking about cricket 24/7. No doubt the kids have played a huge role in that because they don't give me a choice. I've got no time to think about the game when they're around, which is great. But yeah, always having something, whether it's an interest or a hobby, some study or whatever it may be, I always tried to find something that would take my mind away from thinking about cricket 24/7, because when I didn't have that in my life, I found that mentally I was almost shot before I went out to bat. I'd been thinking about it for so long. So finding a balance was important for me, and I think it's important for everyone, really.
All right, now I just want to talk a little bit before we finish up about leadership. In the latter part of your career, you created a reputation as not only a great captain, and you had a lot of success with WA, the Scorchers and Middlesex, but also a great leader. What do you believe are the key factors that make a good leader?
Uh, I, I think my captaincy journey and my leadership journey developed along the way. I'm a big believer that captains learn the most about themselves and their style of captaincy by actually going out in the middle and doing it and making mistakes and learning from those mistakes. So I made plenty of mistakes along the way. I made mistakes right up until the last game of cricket that I played, but I found that as long as I made conscious effort to move on and learn from those mistakes, I think that helped me become a better leader each time. I think communication and genuinely getting to know your players and genuinely caring about your players plays a huge role in leadership, particularly within a cricket team. It helps you to understand how your players think. It helps you to communicate with them about what you're trying to do with them. But it just makes them feel comfortable with you as well, and that's the most important part. Everyone's different, everyone has their own personalities, everyone has their own different motivations, so it's working out what that is for each different person and treating them and communicating with them accordingly, which I think was probably my biggest strength as a captain. I always felt that I had to play well myself. I didn't have to be the best player in the team, but I always knew that I had to make sure my own game and my own performance was in order to lead the way in that respect from captaincy. But yeah, and just to be, again, just to be level, to never get too disappointed when things didn't go well, to be honest with players, because if they needed a kick up the bum occasionally, I was happy to do that, but then was very quickly to move on from that as well, and then to celebrate the wins and that sort of thing, but just to make sure that the boys were ready to go for their next opportunity. So that doesn't happen overnight. That takes a while and time and effort to develop. But yeah, like I said, I certainly made plenty of mistakes along the way as well.
And even before your captaincy, when you were sort of playing under Marcus North, you were still a leader amongst the group. What sort of things do you think are great things people can focus on, I suppose, if they want to be leaders without the title of a captain?
Yeah, I think you've got to understand the values of your team, of your club, and how your team want to conduct themselves and how they want to play their cricket. And if you understand that and you buy into that fully, then you are a leader, regardless of whether you've got the captain or the C next to your name. If you're able to drive that and continue to live that each day, then you are leading in an effect. And the more people that you can get on board with that, the better the group will progress. And to the point where when I retired from state cricket in WA, there's probably 6 or 7 blokes who could have taken my spot as captain, because I think they all did that incredibly well. And just being honest with your teammates is one of the biggest values that, or one of my biggest, or I think was one of my biggest strengths during my time as a captain. You have to deliver some really tough messages sometimes, and messages that blokes don't want to hear. But I've always found that if you're honest and you're up front with them, they'll respect the decision. They might not like you for a little while, but they'll at least respect that you've been honest with them.
Awesome. And now your career's almost over. Obviously a couple of games to go for the great Melville Storm, but you're transitioning into some coaching. You've been away with the W under-19s a few months ago. Is that the long-term plan for you going forward, try and get into some coaching? Certainly
at the moment it is, yeah. Been lucky enough to do a little bit with the 19s and a tour game and a couple of second 11 games, and it's something that I've really enjoyed, and yeah, it's something that certainly in the near future I'd like to continue to do. I'll do my level 3 during the year, and hopefully there'll be a few more opportunities to do that along the way. I love the game. Hopefully I'll never be too far away from it. But at this stage, yeah, hopefully a little bit of coaching would be good today.
Nice one. Well, hopefully you're not lost to the game. Too much knowledge and wisdom to not pass on. Now, what's the best piece of advice you've ever received throughout your career, if you can think of anything?
Jeez. Best piece of advice. Enjoy the game, enjoy your mates, and watch the ball. They're probably the 3 very simple things, but cricket's a simple game that we tend to complicate a fair bit, so keep it simple.
Absolutely, and I think a lot of people forget to enjoy it at times. They put so much pressure on themselves to perform that they forget to enjoy it, and that's when you perform at your best. So Lastly, what's your definition of success? What do you think success is?
I guess gaining an outcome that you see as being positive. That may be different for everyone. Success for a number 10 batter might be completely different to what it is for your number 3 or your number 4 bowler, batter, sorry. Team success is about being able to celebrate with your mates after a good win. But individual success, I think, is just that. It's individual, and everyone talks about getting hundreds or taking fifers, but for each individual, that might not be what they deem as being successful. So finding an outcome that you think that you can achieve and then going out and achieving it, I believe is success.
Awesome. And why do you play cricket?
Because I love it. I'm 38 years old and I'm coming out to play a little bit more grade cricket at the end because I'm playing with my mates. There's an opportunity to hopefully play in some finals and hopefully win something as a team. And that's the reason why I started, and that's why I'll finish off that way as well.
Awesome. Well, Vogesy, thanks very much for your time.
Thanks,
Really appreciate it, and hope our viewers and listeners have really enjoyed an insight from such a great cricketer, great leader, and someone you should all be aspiring to sort of take aspects of what Vogesy's achieved in his career into your game. So cheers there.